Hello and welcome back to the Magic Kathi show and an energy update for this week and the upcoming new moon in Pisces. I feel like we've been through a really tumultuous weekend. On a personal level, I know that. And from the feedback that I've received from a lot of you on Instagram, I also know that you are going through it. And I want to explain a little bit what's happening and how we can move and navigate through these energies in today's episode, because it really feels like this Pisces season is a cleansing on a very deep level. It's, Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, right? So we have to talk about death. We have to talk about exiting and really, returning to source and then reincarnating, so to speak, as Aries, right? That's the beginning of the zodiac. And because we are before the beginning, we are in this death phase. I often speak about that when I talk about your solar return, for example. The month before your solar return usually also feels really Piscean, feels really like a death period because it prepares you for a new start. So essentially we are in the last month of the astrological year and prepare for a new start, a fresh start for the new year, so to speak. And that's also why it feels so intense. But there are a lot of things happening simultaneously that lead up to this climax point that I feel like a lot of us are in right now. And I want to speak about also the gene key that we move into this week, which is 22, which is one of my dearest ones. It's grace, right? In the city state, it's grace. And it's a gene key that has been teaching me a lot. And I shared it on Instagram. There's one quote that always comes into my mind when I think about this gene key, and when I think about periods in my life where I feel really challenged and really like there's no end of the tunnel, then I always think of that quote, and it is basically suffering is grace. And the first time I heard this quote, I was like, what the flying fuck? Like, how on earth would that even be possible, right? How can suffering be grace? How can suffering be an act of love? How can suffering be, benevolent in a way, right? If you want to judge it, but obviously nothing happens with judgment on this plane. That's what we learn to really, embrace. And I mean, Gene Key 25, which is universal love and acceptance, and seeing love in everything, is one of my core wounds, but also one of my greatest gifts. And it is really learning to find that love and that loving seed in the core of our suffering. And the way I approach any reading, any situation, anytime I'm asked, for guidance, and I'm asked for shining a light on why is this shit happening to me? Why are these patterns coming up? Like, why am I always in this darkness? What is this darkness all about? Will it ever end? And I always approach everything with a lot of curiosity, because for me, it's in every seed of suffering and in the root of suffering, there is actually grace. Because what you are longing for in those moments is what longs for you. Let that sink in for a second. What you are longing for in those moments, right? It goes both sides. So usually when we are faced with so much darkness, right? We crave for light, we crave for happiness, we crave for connection, we want to find meaning, we want to find joy, we want to find happiness, we want to enjoy life again, right? And that energy, which is an electrical impulse, a signal and desire in your heart, essentially, I always come back to that analogy, desire is a frequency that is sent to you from source. So it's actually high intelligence source, the creator of all beings, right? God, however you want to call it, plants that seed inside of you because it longs to experience that through you right now. And that's why you are suffering. Now, when you hear that for the first time, you might be wondering, like, what? That does not make sense. Yeah, for the logical brain, it doesn't make sense. But you have at some point fallen off track or lost your connection to the center, right? To source. And that's why it needed to show you the disconnection so you would long again for the connection. That's how it works. So every time we are in the midst of these dark periods and we feel this deep sense of confusion and loss of connection, it's a call from spirit for you to return back to the center, for you to return back to your source, right? Because you've been maybe too distracted in the outside world, or distracted in general, or whatever have you, you know, you've just basically not been, you know, prioritizing your connection to the source, right? And then the source got jealous and was like, well, if everything else is more important than me, I will show you, and, you know, I will call you back. And the only time, or the only way for us to be called back is actually, in most cases, through the contrast, right? If we don't have an established practice, if we don't really make it a priority to have that connection to our heart, to our core, to our center, and live from that place 24/7, which is obviously really difficult, right? For everyone. No one is holy and is like able to do that, you know? But the more you prioritize that connection, the less you will have those deep suffering moments in your life. That's what I can assure you, because it will stabilize. You know, these fluctuations won't be as strong because you swim with life instead of like going against the current or going your own flow that is not the flow that was designed for you. And that's also, again, why I love to work with astrology, human design, and all of these tools, because they explain to us our energetic flow, our energetic nature. And if we are in that nature, we won't have these crazy contrasting polarity experience, right? And so this week, as we wash away those last seeds of the ego trying to go its own way and do its own thing instead of surrendering to the flow of life and to your nature, we can be faced with those challenges again. We can be faced with what needs to be washed away and surrendered, essentially, right? It's the plan in the mind, the plan in the head, which is essentially the conditioning we have in the head, right? And that's, you know, the ego is not to blame necessarily. The ego is formed by our environment, by our upbringing, by the circumstances we have put ourselves in ever since we, you know, landed here on this earth plane, right? And wanted to have that human experience. So it's not to blame, because we learn through that contrast. We only appreciate our connection to source if we lose it, right? And so all of that is an experience that we wanted to have, right? That independence, that I don't need anything, I can go my own way, head against the wall kind of ego experience we also wanted to have, right? To see, okay, well, it's fun for a while, but then, oh fuck, it really knocks me off center. So I might as well actually find that center first and live from that center all the time, or as much as I can, because it actually is more beneficial, right? It's like a child that wants to rebel and be like, but I'm gonna go my own way, right? And so I wanted just to say that, because I know we've been through a lot and we are going through a lot, but with that Pisces new moon coming up, I feel like, and everything building up to that, and maybe you find yourself challenged with a physical condition again, or an emotional thing, or a reoccurring pattern where you're just, fuck, why is this always happening to me again and again and again and again? It's so tiring, it's exhausting, it's literally burning the life out of you to always fight it, to always struggle against it. And if it's something that keeps coming up and you always have to keep struggle against it, it's usually a sign that it is coming from conditioning. that it's not your nature. You would not need to struggle against your nature all your life. That does not make sense, right? And so it's actually showing you that there's still something, a pattern, a habit, relationship dynamic, a program, whatever it may be, right? A conditioning element in your energetic field that is not your nature. And it's really just pulling that fucking weed out of your energetic DNA blueprint so you could see it again and again and again and literally be burned out by it, right? That's how I feel the energy right now. It's this climax point of we are being faced with the one thing that is just like growing like weed inside of us, but we don't have the energy anymore to fight it any longer because we've been fighting for it or against it all the time, and we are literally like we don't even know what to do anymore, right? And if you feel that and you're on the cusp of giving up, I want to reframe that and say surrender it with curiosity and say, okay, I see. There's some blind spot, I guess, because it keeps coming up, it keeps coming up, it keeps coming up, and I don't have energy anymore to fight it. But I also know that I don't want to be in that situation any longer. No more. It's over. It's done. Like, I don't have energy for it anymore to fight it. So it either stays with me and I'm going to die from it, right? But I can't carry that forward any longer. And that should be your intention, and then surrender it, give it over to the source and say, don't bother me with it anymore. I hear there's something that you are calling me back, right? My suffering is a form of grace. It's a form of calling back myself and all of my cells to my actual nature, to the source of creation. So whatever source is longing here, show it to me, present it to me, and take that burden from me. I don't want to, and I can no longer carry it, right? And to really go into a meditative state or whatever you want to do, plant that seed in your consciousness with this Pisces new moon, and say, and ask for grace, essentially. Ask for grace here. Because there are things where, you know, you've been fighting that battle all your life, all by yourself in a way. Maybe you've asked some healers, you asked some here and there, and you try to figure out the fucking mystery of your life. And at some point, we have to ask ourselves, have I ever actually sat down and said, the source that created this, that created me, that creates the entire universe, what if I asked that source to just remove it from me, right? It would actually be the easiest way to go to the source, right? But how many times do we do that? But it's not about the doing essentially only. It's about, well, will that work, right? Because we believe more in, well, maybe a healer, maybe, you know, whatever is helping, right? Instead of actually seeing the energetic behind it and being like, what if I go to the source? What if I go to the source of all creation and ask here? And then at some point you will come to the realization, and I know that's the next level to wrap your head around, fuck, I'm the source. There is no source outside of me. And maybe that's why it never worked. Right? To go to all of these external things and find a savior somewhere. It's the ultimate illusion. There's a key to free yourself from that suffering. And it is when you realize you create your own suffering. And how? And what? By following the conditioning in the mind. Because that's not you. Right? Again, that's why I love to work with human design. Literally no decision, no driving force in your life is coming from the mind. And sometimes you don't realize that we operate from the mind. There's nothing to be blamed for. We are conditioned to operate our life from the mind. It starts with, the minute you wake up in the morning. Autopilot mind program running. You do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, you have this to plan. It's all that, right? Instead of like, wait a second, mind, shut up. What is my body wanting today? What is my heart wanting today? What am I craving? What is my authority speaking actually? Maybe it's the sacral. What am I lit up by? Maybe it's something else than yesterday, right? We're not robots. We ebb and flow just like nature, like the weather, right? But we don't allow ourselves to live like that. And then we wonder why working or operating ourselves like a robot doesn't work and feels uncomfortable at some point. So, yeah, all I can say is wash away the conditioning week. It's wash away the conditioning and ask to really return to the origin point, the center point, the 0 point, so you can then be birthed in your true core coming into Aries season. And that's really what I wanted you to tap into today if you're faced with challenges, reoccurring themes, and you feel really, out of whack about it and are confused and don't know what to do anymore. What if you approach it like that instead of seeing it as a punishment? Right? It's a calling back to your nature. And how can that inspire and excite a curiosity in you to be like, fuck, this is amazing actually. It's showing me that I'm somewhere off of my nature. I'm very curious about my nature anyway. Who am I, right? What am I doing? Like, what is the true me? Like everyone has that question, right? So every time you suffer, it's like, oh, I'm getting closer to my true core, right? That's the grace behind it. Feel that. Because then you don't have to be afraid anymore of these moments. Yes, they suck in the moment, right? And yes, we all want to be happy all the time. But we have to have the contrast in order to even be able to enjoy those happy moments. And obviously, if you're completely blind in the darkness, you have so many tools out there. Human design, astrology, gene keys, all of that. Maybe you have gene key 22 really dominant in your chart, then you will know a great deal about suffering and also grace, right? So explore that. And whatever is coming up for you this week, really let it die in that balsamic phase leading up to the new moon over the weekend. And I can only say, looking at the astrology and the energetics, it's all about the mind. The mind is the most challenged, and the mind is what causes us the stress, the havoc, all of that. And when I say that, it's the program in the mind. It's not the mind is a bad thing, but the mind is programmed not in your nature. And that's where it gets crazy and havoc, right? Where you go off course. So I would love to hear from you what you're experiencing right now. Maybe you're extremely tired, or there have been a lot of things. I mean, even for me, I've had the craziest dreams, Pisces season, right? And just was knocked out multiple times, like literally crashed, not even moved for 6 hours, and I guess got genetically upgraded somehow. It was wild. Like, I can't even put it into wild words. It's been a moment, and I feel like I've been many different versions in this Pisces season again. So you're not alone, and I always love to hear when you share. So, share the episode on Instagram. Let me know how and when you listen, your main takeaways, and also, again, your feedback always means the world to me, of course, because, it keeps me driving. It keeps me wanting to share my experiences and downloads. I mean, I've been having a lot of crazy downloads that I can't share yet in my meditations, especially. They've been really deep, and I've been shown like a lot of information that I still try to figure out, like, why I am seeing that. But it's all interesting, and I know it come time, there will be a reason. All I can say is everything we take in right now, it's information, food, water, energy essentially, right? People, environment. Be very mindful that everything carries a frequency. That's my main advice for now, because I can't share more yet. I will eventually. But really, we have to see with Pluto in Aquarius now, the world as frequency. And be mindful of our frequency no matter what the mind has to say about it. It does not have to make sense. Right? Because our frequency is our greatest currency moving forward. Know that. And I want to say tolerance to us engaging and mingling with frequencies that are not aligned, the threshold will get lower and lower and lower and lower, meaning it will backfire quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. And again, that's for everything you do during the day, including you not following your strategy and authority, instantly backfiring, right? It's energetic feedback instantly. Can't do that anymore. You saying something that is not aligned will instantly backfire. You eating something that is actually not aligned, instantly backfiring. You're not taking proper care of yourself, meaning also, your routine with meditating, all of these things, doing things from like pressure and all of the, instantly backfiring. It's all of that, right? So also when we are in those moments, it's a teaching for us to, or a quest for us to investigate, where have I engaged in energetic activities that I know now are not 100% aligned. Not strategy and authority in human design, not in the highest expression of my gene keys, not based on my astrological activations, right? Again, if you would like to investigate that further, you feel like you're on the cusp of something really big and transformative in your life, please reach out for a reading, because the tools and the help and the support is out there. You don't have to walk this path alone. I know sometimes we are really blind to our patterns, right? That's why we have a lot of people, holding our hand, walking us home, right? So, you know where you can find me also. Yeah, so that's my last word. I'm excited for this new moon in Pisces, I guess, because it's been a rough ride, and I feel like we all need to remember the grace that is behind all of it, right? And the love in our heart, because that frequency overrides every shadow. But I know it's not always easy to stay in that frequency and to tap back into it, but it always lives there in your heart. So, with that being said, again, share the episode with someone who might be in their suffering and needs to hear it, or with a loved one, or whatever you want, it makes the day of me and of that person, And yeah, I'm sending you so much love. We will speak very soon. See you over on Instagram, and I hope and pray that you truly step into your most natural magic. No matter what the suffering is, remember it's grace. It's your own light that tries to call you back.